good morning or afternoon or whatever time it is for you joining. Hi, David. How are you? We are going to be talking about PBL, and this is part one. So you'll have to join us next Friday, same time for part two. But we are just going to talk about the beginning because PBL has a lot of parts to it. And I'm going to go ahead and throw the slides into the chat. So you're going to want to make sure you grab that and open that up if you want to follow along with us. If you just want to save it for later, that's totally fine as well. But in the chat, let us know where you're joining from. Also, the link for the slides, if you come in a little bit later, or you're watching the recording, they are in the YouTube description as well. So you can get them either place that you might want them. I am so excited because I get to bring on one of my amazing teachers that I got to work with this past school year. And I think we really connected. We have like an innovation conference, and I just remember getting like a ton of messages from her, like, I want to do this. I want to do PBL. I want to try this and this and this. And then I go in and like, she's more of an expert than I am. So I am so excited to bring Jen on so that she can talk about PBL. And we're going to kind of have a conversation about project-based learning and what that kind of looks like in her classroom and how she organizes it. And then part two is going to be that messy middle. I love that title that Jen kind of came up with for that. So it's that messy piece of PBL because it is messy, especially when you're first trying it out. So let's go ahead and bring Jen on. Hey, Jen.
Hey guys. So that was nice things you say about me, Steph.
Well, you are amazing. And she's not afraid to jump in and try. And I think that's part of it with PBL, don't you?
Yeah, because actually I put that on the notes on the slides. Like I actually wanted to do PBL for 2 years before I was like, all right, enough is enough. I have gone to every class there is on it. I just have to try something. And I had done a lot of projects, but not project-based learning. And so there is a difference. But don't be like me. Just jump in and try it because you really can't mess it up, which is something I didn't know until I tried it, that you really can't go wrong. So
Yeah.
anyway,
So Jen is a math teacher. Last year she taught, wasn't it like seventh grader? You guys are like confusing in the
yeah,
junior because it's like
yeah,
seventh graders, but they were like algebra.
yeah. So our gifted seventh graders take Algebra 1. So this can be for a normal Algebra 1 class as well, but what I'm going to kind of show, and it can be for any subject. In fact, one of the classes I did take was through PBL Ohio, which I believe they came up with that title, The Messy Middle. I just stole it. But um, anyway, it's not just for gifted kids is my point. I think it would be structured differently, but overall, yeah, this is for any ability level.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and dive in to what
Okay.
part one kind of looks like when you're planning PBL.
Yeah, so when you're planning, basically that's where the bulk of the work is for the teacher. You just want to everything be set up so that you can succeed as much as you want it to be. Like it can be as big and as elaborate or as simple and short as you want it to be. I think this is probably going to be 3 parts because, there's also an end. And to have all of it all at once, I think was overwhelming for me. So, just smaller bites is more doable. And I am not an expert, so I just want to put it out there. I've only done 2 of these ever. Like I said, I've done a lot of projects, but they were more like summative projects. Like we learned all the lessons. Okay, so let's apply it. And we did that in a project. But this is a lot different. And if it wasn't for Stephanie helping me and getting of course, she's awesome at cute slides, but more than that, she helped me get the audience and all the tech stuff because it was COVID. And so to have an audience to present to that can't come in the building, was like a trick. So, and also our math coach, Kurt Keller, just stellar. He helped me with all the, what is it? Does it have to look like that? I mean, he just really stretched my thinking about what I thought a project had to be.
Yeah, and I kind of want to touch on something real quick too, Jen. Like, how did you feel? Because we kind of had this conversation when you were thinking about PBL. Like, Is it okay? And I don't like none of the other teachers that I teach algebra with do it. Do you want to talk about some of those feelings or is that too
Sure.
vulnerable?
Yeah, I was gonna, no, it's fine. So yeah, our TBT, um, which are teacher-based teams, we called them hyperdocs. Basically, they were Google Docs with all these different modes of learning, primarily videos and ed puzzles, things like that. And then they had to show evidence of their understanding, and then they could choose. That's where we were really big on student choice this year, as we should have been years before. But it was like, hey, you can do, this Khan Academy, you can do this quizzes, you could do this or that. There was, three or four choices. Maybe they had to pick two or pick one, and it worked really well. But my gifted kids could finish those so fast. They were just like, hey, I know you gave us like 3 weeks to do this, but it's only week one and I'm done. And I'm like, okay. So to have enrichment activities for 2 weeks just seemed kind of excessive. So I just I just asked my math coach, and he got, who needed to be involved at the district, like, can I just go rogue a little bit? I will promise I'll meet the deadlines. Like, they'll take the test on the same day as the rest of the team. They'll learn the same things as the team is learning. All the assessments, common assessments, will still be done. I just want to get there a different route. And I showed them some of my plans and ideas, and they were like, yeah, this is the year to try it. It's COVID.
Yeah, and so I think if you're getting some pushback, because that's like the first thing that I think about when PBL kind of comes up is people are afraid to ask, because there is some pushback in some districts. And I think what Jen did of like showing evidence, like this is my plan. The students are still learning the exact same standards, just in a different way. And because she provided that evidence, her admin was in more support of it. If parents had questions, her admin knew how to back her up because she had that prior conversation. So I think sometimes you might hear no, but you just need to kind of say, well, this is what I'm thinking. Like, this is kind of the outline. So if you do need someone to talk to, Jen is your person because she had every duck in a line when she was going about this. That it was hard to say no to her, even though we weren't going to. But we weren't going to say no, but she just had everything organized. She knew what she was doing. And it was hard, I'm sure, during some of those TBT meetings too with the other teachers when they're planning lessons and you're like, well, I'm thinking of this idea, like you didn't have.
Yeah, and I didn't give up my spot, like as far as, we would divide and conquer units of study. So, if someone was creating a video on this content, I never said, well, I'm not creating videos. Like, I still did that for the team. And then my students still watched the videos. They don't always just get it the first time. They had to go back and relearn something, or, everyone learns a little bit different. So just having them there as a resource was still really important. So everything that we did in TBT still happened in my classroom for the most part. I mean, they still had access to everything, and I didn't just say, well, I'm doing PBL, so I'm not going to create anything for you guys. And that totally wasn't what happened. I just still held my weight, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't more work. It was just different.
Mm-hmm. And then on the next step, so the first part is just that planning piece, kind of like what Jen explained, how she went to her admin to kind of explain what's going to happen and what it's going to look like. The next part of it.
Yeah, so like once you're ready, you have to kind of decide, what do you want your students to understand? So this is typically when you start with your standards, which is where I started, because we were talking about a whole unit of study in our, from our curriculum. And both of my PBLs, like Steph mentioned, sorry, are from Algebra 1. So that's what you're going to see, sorry, is a bunch of math. But I found that, again, in the classes that I took, they would always say math is the hardest thing to do a project on, which, when your background is math, I'm like, I can think of so many projects that are math based. But you could also add, like, if you could collaborate with other content areas, like it would have been really cool we're doing a research project, if they had to write something about it for the ELA teacher, or there was some projects I kind of put aside because they could do an experiment. Like if they had to build something for a company, like could they make a prototype in science class that had to do with simple machines? Or, there's so many things that you could bring into this that I didn't. I just like stuck to my stuff. So you could, if you're a younger primary grades, you could meet multiple standards in multiple content areas doing PBL. So anyway, how do you want to have them show evidence? So like, what do you want the product to look like at the end? And what items are you requiring the students to include so that they learn the material? So that could be anything from like formative assessments. I did check-ins and formative assessments. It could be quizzes, any of the traditional things can be included in that. And then when do you want them to be finished? So this can go on forever, especially if your students are really into what they're researching, which my kids ended up being really, really into some of their topics. You just have to cut them off. Like, some topics are just like rabbit holes. You could go on forever and ever, and there's no answer, right? Some of the things that they wanted to, social justice things, there's just no answer. We don't know yet how that's going to roll out, but it's really cool that you're interested in it. So there has to be a deadline. And so when I started, my goal was to stick with the TBT's timeline of when the unit would be over. And we met that date, and we actually had time left over, which I did not anticipate at all. Since it seems like I'm doing more, but I really wasn't. I just was doing different stuff. So it doesn't take more time to execute the PBL. It just maybe takes more time to plan it because we don't know what we're doing at first. And so you're just like, okay, we've never done it before. You can overthink it, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think too, using that backwards design type of thinking when you're planning out this lesson of looking at a calendar, because I know you had one printed off, and going,
Yeah,
okay,
for sure.
here's the end date. What pieces need to happen in between that end date and now? And so that's kind of what Jen did, is she took a calendar, and again, she printed it. So you might want to
For
consider
sure.
printing it rather than doing it digitally on Google Calendar. So that way you can kind of map out, how much time do I have? What is each piece going to look like? What are the standards I'm covering, and that kind of stuff.
For sure. And then it was like, oh, all of these grand ideas that I had, I'm like, oh, there's no time for that. Like, you just get the skeleton, like this is the bare bones. And if we have time, we'll add this piece and we'll add this piece. And that's how we rolled the first one.
Yeah. So step 2.
Yeah. So once you know what your PBL is all about, you want the students to buy in. So let me say this. Some students complain when you ask them to add a piece of paper. You're just going to hear about it, like no other teachers are doing projects, and why do we have to do a project? I just was like, you're just lucky, I guess. I would just they were really complaining, but I just made it like, oh, you're just lucky you have me. So you're going to hear about it. There'll be I don't know. I taught junior high during this project, so they just have to talk about something. But by the end, they were super excited about their projects, and my goal on that day one is when I'm rolling it out is I want to get them hooked. So the first project I did about linear equations, it covered everything from graphing them, slope intercept form, all the forms, slope intercept form, point slope form, all these different kinds of equations, and then interpreting them, which is the bulk of what the project is they were creating scatter plots about data that they were interested in gathering, and then finding all the pieces, making different equations, graphing it, all the different, all the ways we teach them how to do, but it was with information that they were finding. So to keep me from freaking out on my first one, I just started with 2 choices. I'm like, you can do this or you can do this, which was real. Like after it was over, the feedback the students gave me was like, hey, we just have so many other interests other than these 2 things that you gave us. So Steph, do you want to go ahead and click on the linear equation project just so you can kind of see, like I put some videos in there.
And all these links are available in the slide deck. So again, I'm
Yes.
going to throw the link in the chat one more time. But if you go to slide number 5, you can click these links and look with us or explore at a later date.
Yeah, and this is just like a template I found. I just threw in what would be required of them. And if you go down to like the 4th slide, I just found a video about the first topic I wanted to talk about that I thought was really funny. This guy is an author that the kids know, and he's talking about the gender pay gap. And so they were like, okay. And then the other topic that they could do had to do with the greenhouse gas emissions. So I had 2 topics, which one, speaks to you more. I mean, that's, I think, what the kids were telling me is like, what if I don't want to do either one? I'm like, well, you're out of luck on this one. You have to just pick one. I didn't have a choice other, which was my hang up, not their hang up. Like they could have totally done other topics. I just was like not ready for that. So anyways, when they were all done, or on the day of the hook, they had to go in. I had a Google form. They filled out, they told me who was in their group. So this was a small group project, 3 or 4 students. They had to tell me which one they were picking. And then I think the next day I had them get me like a group agreement, which we'll get to that. The second project, so after having student feedback, the second project was different because I gave them more topics. In fact, as many as I could think of, and then I had an other. Like, hey, if you can think of something else, you just have to get it approved by me, pick whatever you want. And then they also complained about that all I let them do for presentation on that first project was slides. Like, nope, you have to have slides. That's it. That's all you're allowed to do. Which it seems really silly to me now, but like I literally was so like scared of not having everything be the same, which again is really silly in hindsight. So they also just had partners for this second project. The group of 4, they were saying it was really hard to get everybody together on the same day, especially when they were meeting more virtually, which, valid point. But they still filled out the form after that hook and told me who was their partner and what topic they were going to do.
And again, both of those are linked in the presentation, so you're able to view that information. But one thing that I love is that Jen took that feedback from her students and she made those adjustments for the next project. She didn't say, no, I'm going to stay with just, slides or whatever. She allowed her students to have more choices, and she allowed that option of, this is probably scary that you pick because you don't know what kids are going to come up with, or if they do, but you're able to kind of have them justify if they do want something else. So again, everything is linked into the presentation.
And what's funny is the topics were a little more broad too on the second project. So, like for example, there was a healthcare topic, and one partnership decided they were going to do like the cost of healthcare, like as far as like nationally, how much it costs to have health insurance and how that affects low-income families or small business owners, especially now that it's COVID and all of this stuff. So that was really cool. But then also under healthcare, you can think of like, well, just COVID. And so some of the students came up with a project about, actually it was about food delivery and how that business has boomed because of COVID. So it wasn't really healthcare specific. It was like restaurant, but like the restaurant industry, was seeing a shock, and a lot of them had changed to adding delivery because of COVID. I don't know. It was really cool how even the topics in there that they could click on, it was really just resources for them to read over and find something that really like triggered them in a good way. So yeah, so I kind of talked about the differences, the similarities. Most students didn't want to do this project by themselves. I mean, some of them would say they did, but really, I feel like every person needs to be able to collaborate with others. I mean, just to be in the workforce, it grows everyone involved in the project. For high achieving students, it helps them explain material and create. And for the lower ability students, they can learn from their peers and actually come up to meet with those other, the other partners. So really, I feel like, especially in junior high, they just don't want to stand up there all by themselves anyways, if they would really be honest with themselves, and they don't want to admit that they don't understand. So with two of them, they both understood what they were talking about at the end of it, and it's kind of comforting to share the workload. The accountability is, like I mentioned earlier, check-ins, formative assessments, and you're there to just guide along the way, and the students are, not procrastinating. I had a couple, I was like, really, that was really why I was checking in with them, is for no other reason, to see if they've done something. And others are just, maybe it took a turn, just kind of like just steer them back to, really what is their big question that they wanted to answer. The authentic audience is your guests. Okay, so they're not just presenting to classmates or to me, but to other adults that are interested in their research. And that was pretty tricky with COVID, but got Stephanie helping me out over there, getting everybody on. So that was pretty fun. So the next slide is kind of how I organized the accountability piece. This is for the first project. I had all their names under their group and what their topic was. Oh, whoops. Yeah, that's just a screenshot.
I think there is a link. Let me go to it.
Is there?
Yeah, I'm on the wrong account.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if I linked it or not, but anyways, I just had kept it in columns, and anytime they gave me their presentation, I linked it on there. I tried to give myself like a brief thing of what we talked about, because I made them check in with me 2 different times, because this was a 3-week period. So after the first week, I wanted to make sure A, they had a topic, B, they knew where to start looking for information and how to organize it, because it can be so overwhelming. I mean, you're 12 years old and you're trying to talk about global warming. I mean, it was just like a lot of information, and how to narrow it down to just like 3 or 4 reputable sites. So that was a good practice you don't usually get in math class, is knowing which sites are education worthy, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's huge to think about, how am I going to organize all of the group's information? So if I need to find it, it's all in one place. And so I love what Jen did with Padlet, is she just took it and, is this the columns one? I think is the correct name. So
Yep,
she
they're
did the
columns.
columns version of Padlet, and then every group has a place. And then she just links their presentation right onto it. So then I can go, okay, I need to meet with group 5. Let's see what I already have of theirs, and let's see what they've done so far. Okay, now group 3. You can just, quickly scroll through. And so you've got to figure out, Padlet might not be for you. So you got to figure out, what is your ed tech tool that you're going to use when it comes to organizing this project, because again, you want to stay organized so you can quickly give feedback to students. And so I've seen Google Sheets look similar to this, and every group has like a column across, and then everybody's name, and then links. You could do this, in multiple different ways.
Yeah, I know like Trello is a popular
Trello
platform.
too.
You could even do this in slides. You could have a slide for every group and just, put a whole bunch of stuff on each slide. I mean, you could do it so many ways.
With like the Post-it note version, I personally don't think I could do that, because I need hyperlinks, but
Yeah.
I have seen that. And then it says, this was Jennifer's own tracker, or was it shared with students? So did you share this tracker?
Yeah, this was my own tracker. I did not share it with students, because it's my own personal notes about where they were, if they showed up or they didn't show up for their meeting with me, because the first project was, we were in hybrid is what we called it. So I only saw them twice a week, and they were virtual 3 times a week. So we would meet virtually. I didn't want to take up my precious class time to meet with them. So we would meet, they'd have an appointment, and their group was supposed to show up and talk to me about their project. And then I would take notes. It would be okay to have something like that you shared, especially if you did it on slides, where you said, okay, group 1, here's your slides, here's what I have. But their project slides are attached to this. So I always started our meeting by going to what they had so far. And most of them were chatting on their slides with each other. So that was kind of fun. I would go in there and start chatting with them, and they're like, oh, hi, Mrs. Kirk. This is what we're struggling with. And so it'd be impromptu. I'm just, they would just be like, oh, she's there. You see my name pop up.
And I think too, you could have it shared with students, and maybe that's some of your control, Jen,
I
of
know. I just don't want them to see other students' comments. That would be my thing. Like your group can see your group stuff, but I don't want them to see all the group's stuff.
yeah. And so I'm trying to think, like, if you did want to share this with students, maybe it is like a Google sheet and every group has a different link at the bottom of the spreadsheet. And then I'm pretty sure you can publish just that tab to the groups. So then every group would have a different URL
Yeah.
to that big spreadsheet. I'm pretty sure you can do that. I'm going to like check that after this because I think that'd be a
Yeah. If you could share just a tab, that would be perfect.
yeah, I
That
don't
would
know
be
if they can
perfect.
edit it or if it might just be view only.
Mhm.
Um, but
But
at least
that's okay
they're
too.
able to see, where they're at.
Yeah.
So if you guys have other ideas on having students track with you, let us know because that would be really cool.
And it really helped me at the end, to go over 4 weeks worth of work at the end when I'm supposed to give them some kind of grade,
Yeah.
like so to remember all the stuff they did from day one, to day 21, how much work did they do, or 28, or however long I can't remember if it was 3 or 4 weeks that first one, but anyway, it helped my memory, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So yeah, this slide is where I was talking about how the project team had a contract. That's the one on the right there. I came up with some things that I thought were norms that when the groups were speaking with each other, that I want them to be nice to each other. I want them to be helpful to one another, kind of be focused. And then I kind of left a blank, like, hey, add in something else that your group needs for you specifically. If you can think of something that your dynamic, we're gonna have to make this a norm. And then I had them sign it virtually, so I made them go to Jamboard and like sign their name and then take screenshots and stick it in. So it's really cute to have their little signatures all over the bottom. But it was important, I think, to know that I was expecting this to be followed for their group. It's just a commitment level to the grades of others, because if you don't pull your weight, then the whole group suffers. And that was, I know, concerns with gifted kids is like, what if they get an F but I get an A? Are you giving us both C's? That's not fair. And like, nope, you're going to work together and get the same thing. So, and then the thing on the left hand side is the log, and they were to, every time they did a task or assigned tasks to each other, Johnny's going to create a nice theme, and Susie's going to put in the graph, Joey's going to make the equation. They would kind of divvy up all the work that needed to be done on the requirement and log it, kind of check it off as they go. Snags, if they were like, I need help, they would write comments off to the side. I can't figure this out. I need your help. And they would tag me. We don't know about this equation, because, they were scatter plots. So they were new. And if we use Desmos to create most of the math. If you don't put your window in just right, it looks crazy. So there's just like a lot of technical stuff they could ask for help there, because we went over those at their little meetings too.
Yeah. And I love this because it has the task, who is responsible. So then if it doesn't go or happen, that team can go, okay, what do you need help with? How can we support you? Or, hey, I finished early. Who needs some help? They're able to kind of see this tracker and see what's due, the status, and kind of follow along with each other. So I think that's really important. And I think this is missing because I've seen a lot of failed PBL. And I think this is the part that is missing in a lot of them is there's no like action steps. And a lot of times teachers just say, here's the end date. You figure it out. Kids need structure and they need help with those different action dates. I mean, teachers and educators and adults need help with those different action
Yes.
steps of who's doing what, when is it due. And so we need help, so do our kids. But I've seen it in action where there is no action steps. It's just like, hey, this is due by this date. Good luck. And then the kids don't know how to break down the task. They don't have the resources to kind of say, okay, I'm going to do this, you're going to do this. And then the group fights and it becomes a huge issue. So I love that you put the contract and the management log into place.
I think it's a collaboration piece and it's an evidence piece. Like it kind of has a dual purpose, the log especially. So checkpoints. This is part of the middle, but just to kind of a glimpse of the messy middle. You kind of plan it at the beginning though, because you definitely need to know what you want them to know by when, especially if you're going to give some kind of structured assessment, if you're going to give a quiz to the whole class on a certain day, they need to be able to do, some minimum tasks. It kept me on my timeline a little bit better too. And I'm checking for understanding so that when they go back to their project, I'm assured that yes, they do know how to find the slope of a line. Yes, they do know how to find a y-intercept and interpret what it means, that kind of thing along the way. And the group work, again, that's the middle. You can just see what all is going on at the same time. So it seems really overwhelming, but it's surprisingly not. Like if I'm telling you that, it's true because, I don't know. I don't think I'm a control freak, but until things go crazy. But they're just doing so much all at once at different paces. And at the end, it just like all nicely comes together. It's just like magic.
And I think too, you kind of gave them some student choice. And you said some students were commenting in the Google slide to each other. Other students, they had a discussion document. Some students might have been emailing each other. Like it was all different, and she allowed it to be different for the groups.
Yeah, and it couldn't be monitored. I mean, it was just that's what I think where the letting go part was like, because some of them were best friends. I mean, they texted. I can't monitor texts, I don't even want to. I mean, right? I mean, I don't want to know what they're saying. So the discussion documents were funny because they would just be like this running text, and they were like, be in different colors or whatever. And then one group was really creative because they had a slide that was their discussion slide, and it had like a box for Johnny, a box for Susie, a box, and they would just type in their own little box and then answer each other. I don't know. It was funny, but I wouldn't have thought of that. I wouldn't have thought to tell them, hey, you can just make a slide and talk to each other. I mean, they just figured all that out on their own. It was like, just put it out there and the little worker bees go to work.
Yeah, for sure. And then you kind of had to think about inviting guests in the beginning as well, didn't you?
Yeah, so officially this would be like the end thing because you're going to have the authentic audience, but at the beginning you have to invite them or they're not going to come because you're going to go, oh, we're presenting tomorrow and busy people won't be able to come tomorrow. So when we actually had a couple college students that attended. They were interested in both of the topics for that first project. And my daughter was actually one of those college students. She's very interested in the gender pay gap and was super impressed that seventh graders came up with all of this evidence, on their own, just researching. And she was just like so proud of them for knowing about it in seventh grade, let alone researching it in seventh grade. So anyways, it was really fun to have. We had another, I believe a banker came to that first presentation. So anyway, they had to be invited so that it would be on their calendar and they would reserve the spot for the students. So this is just like a screenshot of the email that I think Stephanie got this email.
Yeah. And I think that's nerve-wracking, because you're like, what if the projects aren't done? What if this happened, and it's just like so many what ifs. And I think I remember too, like, what if, testing gets moved around or something happens with the schedule? Like it is nerve-wracking to schedule something. And then
that's the day that Google went down. Do you remember? Like Google went down like 20 minutes before my projects, and they were all Google Slides. So, and we were doing a Google Meet, and
but it's okay. It was
email, Gmail. I couldn't contact anybody. I was flipping out. I'm like, well, guess we'll try again tomorrow. I don't know. No, but it all happened. It all worked out. But yeah, I was like, I don't know whether I should laugh or cry right now.
For sure.
but yeah, it was fun to have people that were outside the school district too. Like it wasn't just a group of teachers. And I think it made the students take it a lot more seriously. Like they're
Mhm.
like, oh, adults are going to be there. I'm like, yeah. And I would explain, there's going to be a banker, there's going to be a couple college students, da, da, da. And they were like, and I'm like, and some people from district office, and da, da. And they were like, I mean, just the quality from one check-in to the next check-in was like exponential. It was great. It's like, okay, so now it's not just Mrs. Kirk, making you do work. It's a real thing.
Yeah. And then there's a question in the chat, but if you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. One of them I kind of was waiting until the end because you teach, gifted students, and I know you want to use this with your reg ed kids as
Yes.
well next year. Do you see any differences or anything between the gifted and reg ed that you might do differently?
Yeah, I think the timeline would be different. We definitely did this fast, too fast for, we did an entire unit in like I think it was 4 weeks, that first one. And like a regular ed kid doesn't learn that fast. They have to hear something more times than just once. Like, oh yeah, we learned slope one day and that was it. We know slope. And it's not how it works, with reg ed. So it would be, it would just be a different timeline. And I would still have the project be worked on 3 to 4 weeks, but I think everything, the knowledge part would happen before they knew the project was going to happen, so that they would have confidence, a little bit of confidence, like I know some of this stuff already. And then that thrown off a little bit, but I don't know how to do maybe a scatter plot yet, but I know how to find slope, but I don't know how to do a scatter plot. So you could kind of introduce the project part midway through the unit, since the unit might take a little longer to get through. But yeah, the timeline is pretty much the only thing I can think of that I would change.
Yeah. And then I wanted to go over that Google Slides thing, and I'm going to pull up what I have so far. So right here, I love the idea of adding students onto that tracker. So this is a Google Sheet. And I just quickly, this would look a lot better, just like Jen's Padlet. But I would just like put the kids' names, I would put their slide URL, maybe the meeting dates, and then whatever else I'm thinking of. And then what I'm going to do is you go to File, Publish to the Web. And then when you go to File to the Web, see where it says Entire Document. I change that to just Group 1.
Oh, that is awesome. Okay, so I might have to change my Padlet thing for next one, because it would be nice for them to see like my comments. Even though it's view only, right?
Yeah.
They could still see what I'm saying, and I could say, hey, do you agree with that? Do you agree with that, what I'm saying, that this is where you're at? I love that. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah.
And so instead of the entire document, make sure you do Group 1. And then you want to do the web page. This will like download as a CSV file, PDF, but you want the web page because every time that they refresh, they can see those updated notes. And then you would take this link and send that to Group 1. And so then their view would look like this. So it's kind of like simple, like they can't edit, they can't do anything with it, but they can see all your notes, they could see your links, that kind of stuff. And again, I'm the type of person that needs everything in one spot. So having like 5 different Google Docs, I guess I could link them here to have like a conversation with the kids or something like that. But I'm one that needs everything in one spot. So that could be an idea.
Yeah, I definitely need it in one spot. Because I did toy with different things. Like I could just have a different, totally different thing for each group. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
that just means I'll lose one of them. So.
And then also in the chat, you've got Danielle and Oscar who are saying they would love to be part of your audience. If you ever need, they said connect with them. They would love to come in and watch a project. And Danielle is sure in Ireland. Oscar, I want to say California. Could be completely wrong.
Yeah, the time might not be great.
Yeah. I'm
yeah, you'll be watching a PBL at 2 a.m. or something, but
yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. We always need, a follow-up to that email was a Google form for our audience. to kind of rate them. Like, what questions do you still have? Do you think that they answered their essential question? Because, they had to come up with like their essential question. Like, what about gender pay do you want to answer in your project with your math? Like, what can math help you answer? And so it was like the audience could, ask them live questions right then, which a lot of them did, or, what don't I still understand about their project, or what was awesome about their project? What do I want to know more about because of their project? So yes, we're always looking for that. It's really, yay. You can find me on Twitter at Mrs. Matt Kirk.
Yeah, Jen is on Twitter, so make sure you do follow her. And I can throw her handle into the chat as well. And I did not see any other questions. I think you answered them, I'm going to assume.
Yeah.
I think people got a lot of answers and ideas from just like how you organize the start of PBL. And again, we're going to be back here next week, same time, talking about that messy middle, and then probably a part 3, I think I heard.
Probably. We'll have to see. We'll have to see if we can do the middle and the end at the same time.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Send Jen some love on Twitter so we can get a part 3, because I think that would be really awesome to just have all of those different pieces of this, because it is a lot, but you can do it and you don't have to be so controlling because you got
True.
this.
And it's better if you're not. It's a much more successful project if you're not.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm throwing her Twitter right into the chat right now, so you can go ahead over and follow her. And feel free to message her with any questions. I know she will answer them because she always answers mine.
I will, absolutely.
And then also, if you're not a part of our Google group, feel free to join our Google group. This is kind of where you find out about upcoming sessions. You're able to get some information on different things that we're doing. So make sure you join that Google group. If you have not yet, I'm going to throw the link for you in the chat, but the bit.ly is there, but it has to be like a capital H and all that kind of stuff. So let me throw that link in there. And then also, if you need feedback, or not feedback, if you need a certificate of attendance, I'm going to throw that link in there as well. This also gives Jen and I feedback on how to improve these different sessions for you, or if you want more or less of them. This kind of lets us know. So I'm going to throw that in there as well. And you do get a certificate of attendance. So if you need that for LPDC credit or any type of credit option, if your state accepts it, feel free to fill that out as well. And it's just a quick Google form that you fill out, and it's auto-generated. So that means make sure you spell everything correctly, and then it will send that information to you, and you can go ahead and fill out all of that different information about the feedback. And then join us, save the date for the 16th, same time at 1 p.m. Eastern. And we will be back talking about that messy middle. So thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Jen. I really appreciated you coming on today.
My pleasure.